What's up, guys? I want to have a more personal talk. I want to share some stuff that I've been thinking and feeling, and I wanted it to just be more like informal, so that I can just talk like I'm talking to any friend of mine. We can at least use the studio lights, right? Let's have some standards here, please. There we go. So, this video is probably going to be a little personal, a little more maybe emotional, so if that's not what you're up for right now, you might want to check back in on the channel later. I want to sort of share some things. So, first of all, I want to dedicate this video to, it's a little bright, whatever. I want to dedicate this video to Michelle, our most recent new Patreon supporter, top level Patreon supporter. So the Patreon supporters are so awesome because, I don't know, it helps me feel like what I'm doing is something that people want and is sort of the market telling me that I'm doing a good job. And then, of course, it adds a little bit of a stress in that, I'm going through some stuff that makes it difficult to produce content. So I feel like I've been hired by these people to perform a job, and I'm not always able to perform it as often as I want. But this talk I wanted to be about things that I've kind of learned over the past couple years. One sort of thing in particular. And if you go back to the Better Way to Human vlog that I did, where I tried to vlog every day for 30 days, you can go back and find those on the channel. There was one of the videos where I had talked about something that happened in my life where, I was betrayed and I was hurt. And, a very close relationship to me had hurt me. And the truth that I saw in that moment, and that I think is important for people to realize, and I think is a starting point for the story I want to tell today, is that people give you their truth, about what they're thinking, about what they're feeling, about what they plan to do, about what type of person they are, what quality of person they are, all this. They give you all this truth constantly through their actions and less so through their words, but they definitely give it to you through their actions. And it's very easy for us to make assumptions, assume the best of people, especially the people we consider our close relationships or our close friends. It's easy to overlook or ignore the truth that they're shouting at us with their actions. And so, we get comfortable in relationships, and we have expectations of people that allow people, especially friends, a lot of leeway, a lot of trust. And I think it's natural to just allow ourselves to just become complacent in relationships, and that makes it possible for people's truth to stop coming through as loud and clear to us as it should. It makes it possible for us to miss, very glaring red flags. And so when somebody doesn't act how we expect them to, or when somebody hurts us, it's painful. Why is it painful is the point, right? It's painful less because of whatever they did to you, and more painful because of that it wasn't expected. Like, if you expect someone is a bad person, and you expect them to do bad things and to betray people or hurt people or, whatever, rob people, take their stuff, whatever. Then when they do, you're just kind of like, oh yeah, well, I knew they were a bad person. They did bad things. Also, it allows you to prepare, right? To not trust them with things that they allow you to minimize the damage. Turn the brightness down. This is bothering me. Is that better? All right. So the thing that's painful when this stuff happens is the pain is mostly caused by the gap between our expectations and reality. Our expectations of the person's behavior, what type of person they are, the quality of their character, and the reality of what kind of person they are, and the reality of their quality of character. There's a gap there, and the gap is where the pain comes from. The emotional pain, and also, potentially property damage and other types of pain that comes from not having accurate expectations. And to get even more deeply philosophical about it, you could also analyze that pain and I think understand that at least part of it, why is that painful? Why is it painful to have a gap in our expectations, between our expectations and reality, is because when someone betrays us, or when someone acts in a way that contradicts our expectations, it undermines our ability to be confident in ourselves, it undermines our self-confidence and our judgment of other people and of the world and reality in general. That's painful. Losing your trust in yourself, losing your trust in your ability to perceive the world accurately, is painful and scary. And so that's why it's important to make sure that we're constantly open and vigilant to the truth that people are sending us, even from the people that are our friends, or close relationships that we've trusted for a long time. It's always good just to be constantly open and vigilant to the reality around us. And when we allow ourselves to diverge from reality, we set ourselves up for pain and difficulty, and we leave ourselves open to being hurt or damaged by reality, because reality doesn't care. And if we have reality wrong, then we're going to stumble into the curb that we couldn't see. It's simple to say, right? But it's hard to live. It's hard to enact. I've got a couple notes just because I didn't want to ramble through this. I just wanted to make sure I stayed on track, because I think it's going to get harder for me. So bear with me. And I try not to talk about my really personal stuff very often, because number one, it's a drag. It brings everybody down, myself included. Number two, it's personal. It's none of anybody's business, really. But at the same time, I'm going through a set of circumstances that are not standard, that not everybody goes through, thankfully, that may expose me to some truths, maybe, in a different way that people don't normally get. So I want to take moments when that's a thing to share with people. So it's important, like I said, to seek reality constantly in all of our relationships, in everything, really. And that was the first step. So the first step was understanding the nature of making sure you stay in touch with reality in your relationships, and you look for the truth that people send you through their actions, and just sort of check your expectations from time to time. And then over the past couple of years, since I had those thoughts, I've been noticing that same lesson can be applied in so many more places. Like, as I've lived my life recently, over the past couple of years, I've noticed that every time something doesn't go right and something happens that didn't match my expectations, it's another reminder to me that, oh, well, that sucked. That was painful. I didn't like that happened. But now that I see the reality of the situation, and look back on it, you can see retroactively, you can see the red flags and the things that you should have realized before, right? The difference between our reality and expectations is always where the danger is. It's dangerous to ourselves, our property, family, feelings, careers, our activism, everything. So when we find in the situation, we can embrace it, which limits damage to all those things, our emotions included. And think about how many things this applies to. Like, I've just been marveling at all the applications that this has. So you want to be an activist and you want to change the world, right? And so you're told that from birth that if you want to change the world, you get involved politically. And so people spend years and years of their life acting according to the expectations that they have, ignoring many, many signs of the twisted futility of those levers on that machine. You're told that if you just get involved and you pull these levers in this certain way, then change can happen and you can affect things. And then when time and time again you pull those levers and you go down those paths and then it doesn't work, people see those red flags. The red flags are beating them about the face and neck, right? And they're just ignoring them and they're continuing to try again to pull those levers again. That's an example of what I'm talking about. Abusive relationships, when somebody hurts you physically, emotionally, whatever, they damage you. They're giving you truth that you need to see and you need to realize and you need to accept and embrace, and then realize that heavy machinery and I'm pulling out how to operate the machine. I'm not aware of the functions of all the parts in the machine. And so I'm swinging the machine around wildly. I hurt myself. I hurt somebody else. I might damage property. It's just another manifestation of kind of this principle. You have to know. You have to embrace the reality, and you have to watch out for it, because that helps cope, and it helps plan and prevent damage. So the recent lesson comes from what's been happening with my daughter, right? For those that don't know, she's been diagnosed with leukemia, and she's going through chemotherapy now. She's 3 years old. And so, of course, when something like this happens, it completely catches you off guard, and it hurts you in the deepest way possible. And you go through this process, right, of who do I blame? Do I blame myself? Did we do something wrong that exposed her to something that, gave her cancer? How could we have prevented this? Did we not protect her in some way? How on earth does, in any kind of just or fair universe, does a 3-year-old deserve this? How do you handle it? How do you cope with it? In what world is it fair or just? These are the things that you think about, right? This is why I've made notes. And so this idea came back up recently when I was having. Actually, it was because I was writing I was the script for a video I'm going to hopefully create for you guys soon on what are rights, what are they, really, and who gets them. I think these are fundamental concepts that most people don't really pay enough attention to or spend enough time figuring out and understanding and applying in their daily life. So I'm making a video on it, and I start the script out talking about this gap, right, between, and I won't give the whole video to you here, but it's about this principle again, where people have this misunderstanding of the reality of what rights are and how they function on people in the world. They talk about them as things that you possess, as things. They talk about them as things that exist and that you possess and that can be taken from you. They apply sort of the speech and language of property to something that is just a mere concept. And so that's kind of that's going to be the point of the video. And how much damage comes out of that, right? So it's the same topic that we're talking about here. Like when you expect rights to exist and to function in the world and to be able to act and be protected and act to protect you, it makes you more complacent and it makes you behave differently in the world. And it makes you behave in ways that can hurt you, right? Because if you treat rights as some tangible thing that exists in the world and provides a barrier against people hurting you, damaging you or your property or your family or whatever, then the gap between your expectations and your understanding of how rights work and the reality that they're merely this ephemeral concept that only really has an effect in the world when people understand them and behave and act accordingly. And so the first paragraph of that, like I'm writing it down, I'm writing the script, and I kind of rough out the rest of it. And then I just went into like this, it was like an hour long. I found myself like 45 minutes later just staring at my screen at that first paragraph and syncing up my original thing that I talked about between relationships, when people hurt you, through betrayal, through applying that sort of rubric to life in general and making sure that our expectations match reality, to this rights thing that I'm talking about. And then of course that kind of brought it back up because I'm going through this thing with my daughter, or I should say my daughter is going through this thing, and we're along for the ride. And so I was staring at my monitor for, like I said, like 45 minutes, just kind of feeling through this, because a lot of it is an emotional thing, and I'm trying to process why it's so painful. And so what I'm thinking right now, I just wanted to share with you guys, is that when I realized, there was a gap between my understanding of reality and reality. My understanding of reality, and I think a lot of people's understanding of reality, even subconsciously, we have a baseline default expectation that it should be just, that it should be fair, and that it should be kind. And so what that does is it leaves us open to being hurt and damaged when we find out that reality is not always just and kind and fair. And when things hit us, we're caught off guard. We're behind the ball, right? We're trying to catch up. We're trying to only then, in the moment, at the worst possible time, we're trying to process through all of the hurt and the questions and the why and the fairness and the all the stuff I talked about. The questions that you have. Who do you blame? Sorry, guys. Processing through all the questions that you have, like, How could anybody, like, other people's belief in God became, like, before this happened, it didn't even bother me in the slightest. In fact, I had a lot of compassion for people that still had faith in God. But when this happened, internally, I never, voiced this outwardly because I recognized that I was not rational in the moment. But I became angry when people would talk about praying for my daughter going through this. Because it's part of those questions, right, that you ask, like, if God exists, how would he ever allow something as evil as this, as wrong and unfair and unjust and hurtful as this on the most innocent people? And so when people would interact with me about God and on this stuff, I would just get so angry, because it was just another in a long list of things that you have to process when you're not expecting this stuff to happen. Instead of recognizing that cancer in little babies and children is part of life. It is just part of the things that can happen. And that doesn't make it easy to handle, but if we understood the reality of the world in advance, it might help in the moment when this stuff happens, at least pare down the list of questions and problems and objections and emotional hang-ups that come along. Like, this is a thing. This is a thing. This happening happens. Does that make any sense? Like, this happening to people is part of life. And so if we understand that, it takes a lot of the weight off. It removes all those questions, or some of the questions, right? Like, what did we do? What should we have done to prevent it? Like, who do we blame God? Do we get angry at people that want to pray for us about it? No, this is just part of life. It happens. Like, sometimes the sun gets really hot, and if we go out in it, we get sunburned. Well, sometimes when you make children, and 35 years ago, science wouldn't have existed to prevent her death. That's a fact. That's life. It's just another example in a long line of examples of reasons why to looking for truth. I hope this is helping, guys. I wanted to get it out there. I don't want it to be too blubbery, though, so I'm sorry. Okay, so then the last thing I wanted to talk about was, I swear to God, like an hour after I woke up from staring at that paragraph for a long time. Somebody, Larkin's wife, Amanda, posted on my Facebook wall a video by Jordan Peterson. And I had this queued up. I wanted to play it for you guys real quick. All right, here you go. It's like 3 minutes long.
When you love someone, you love them not only despite their fragility, but also because of it. They wouldn't be who they were if they weren't fragile and limited in their particular way. When you have a sick kid, it's like, oh my God, how can the world be constituted so that a child can unfairly suffer in this manner? You can't have them being vulnerable and cute and interesting and small and needing care, but striving to develop and grow, without them also being prone to pain and destruction and vulnerability. Yeah. And then what do? You teach them to be strong. That's what you do. You don't get rid of the vulnerability. You teach them to be strong. You don't protect your children. In fact, you do the opposite. You expose them to the world as much as you possibly can, and you make them strong. That's the best antidote to their vulnerability. The first noble truth of Buddhism: life is suffering. This is true, and it's worse than that because it's suffering contaminated by malevolence. And so that's very pessimistic. But the optimistic part is that you are so damn tough you can actually not only deal with that, you can improve it. It's like, well, that's a horrible situation. But it turns out that I'm armed for the task. Well, that's that's a great thing for people to know. I think the fact that we're armed for the task is even more true than the fact that life is catastrophe contaminated by malevolence. We're stronger than things are terrible. And I do believe it's the case because I've watched people do very difficult things, like people who work in palliative care wards. So all they're ever dealing with is pain and death, right? And they can do it. They get up in the morning, they go to work, and they take care of those people. They lose people on a weekly basis, and yet they can do it. And what that shows is that if you turn around and you confront the suffering voluntarily, you find out that you are way tougher than you think. It's not that life is better than you think. Life is as harsh as you think. It might even be worse, but you are way tougher than you think if you turn around and confront it. It's a very good thing to know, and it's not naive optimism. Yeah. It's a very different thing. It's like, no, things are terrible, they're brutal, and you are so damn tough, you can't believe it.
All right. So, what happened then was, I just broke down bawling for a while, but I didn't agree with everything in that video, and I just wanted to point out a few things and to kind of end this whole messy live stream. So, I loved that he talked about teaching kids to be strong, and exposing them to the world and to reality, because I feel like if I had known ahead of time or been taught, and I'm not blaming my parents, obviously, I'm just thinking about how I'm going to be a better parent to my kids. I want to make sure that they understand reality. And I don't mean to expose them too young in a way that damages them or shocks them or, scars them or whatever. But by the time they're grown and my job is over, I want to make sure that I've left them with a clear view of reality, or a view of reality where they know that stuff like this exists and happens, so that they can be a little bit more prepared if it does. So I thought that was a good message from Peterson. Then he says that life is suffering. He says that life is suffering contaminated by malevolence, I think he said. And that is a very powerful statement that I believe goes too far. I understand where it comes from, right? To continue to exist requires struggle. You wake up every day and you have to work to align your resources with the ability to continue life. And it's easy to say that, okay, well, in a perfect world, some of us would prefer to just do nothing all day and be able to continue living. Well, sorry, that's not how the world works. So to that degree, reality requires that you apply human efforts to continue existing. So in that regard, you might be able to say that life is suffering. But myself and a lot of people don't consider the work that we do suffering. A lot of people take pleasure in it. So in that way, I don't think you can make a universal statement that life is suffering. I think there's a lot of times in life where things are really great and things are awesome, and there is no suffering happening. So to say that life is suffering, I think goes too far and is too pessimistic of an outlook on things. I think a more precise thing to say about life would be to say that life includes suffering. And some of it's unavoidable, and some of it is malevolent and brought on by people being malicious. Then he said, you're so unbelievably strong that you can handle it. We're stronger than things are terrible. Well, again, we gotta stay aligned with reality. Not all of us are stronger than our problems. Like my daughter right now, she's needing a lot of help with her problems, and we're not all so unbelievably strong that we can win. And we have to understand that that's part of reality. And I don't know how to say this. So to a certain extent, I wanted to protect my daughter from the reality of all this, and to a certain extent, I'm still damn sure going to. I'm really, this might not even change much how I behave towards her, around her, or deal with her, or, you know, protect her. I'm still going to do the exact same things as I have been doing for her because she's too young to understand any of this. But it does change how I process my feelings of wanting to protect her. It allows me to be more okay and at peace with the fact that I can't. That's the reality. And to expect different is to detach myself from reality and to take on a lot of guilt and to take on a need to stop things that I can't stop. And so to recognize that this is life, and that, you know what, my daughter's just going to have to live through this. There's not much I can do about it except, you know, go into massive debt and do everything I can, really. But, you know, she's going to have to tough this out, and I really think that she will. And I think that this will add to the epicness of her life's story, and not be the end of it. But whatever happens, this is reality, this is how it works, and this is what's going to happen. And then the last thing in that video that I thought was awesome was he talked about the nurses that are there. And we've interacted with a lot of nurses lately, obviously, and they're all so happy and calm and peaceful and awesome, but, you know, they lose patience in that department often. And, you know, how, like, you know, you think, like, how could a person go to work every day and deal with that repeatedly? Well, it's because their expectations have been brought in line with reality, and they have come to a place of peace with that. So that's kind of the point of the video that I wanted to get out. I hope this was helpful. Thanks, guys.